You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 20th of October 2014. New scandal in Birmingham, child sexploitation predators mainly Asian, victims mainly white. British paedophile cases unsolved, years after tip-offs. Denmark tries a soft-handed approach to returned Islamist fighters. German bikers ride to the rescue against Islamic State while others blabber. Al Jazeera claims Mexican drug cartels are worse than ISIL. ISIS fears female Kurdish warrior Tekoshin, death at her hands sends them straight to hell. Thought for the day, are we completely mad? And finally, the 72 virgins of Allah. UK news. New scandal in Birmingham, child sexploitation predators mainly Asian, victims mainly white. Dozens of girls, some as young as 11, have fallen victim to predatory gangs. 3 out of 4 of the men who groom youngsters for sex in Birmingham are Asian, yet their victims are 82% white, say confidential police statistics leaked this week. A Birmingham Safeguarding Children Board study in September 2013, never released to the media, found 111 youngsters were at risk of sexual exploitation in the city, some as young as 11 and almost half under 15 years of age. The failure to prosecute known offenders was startling and unacceptable, it added. West Midlands Police said last night that it was currently dealing with 57 live child sexual exploitation cases and 130 suspected cases. Assistant Chief Constable Carl Fuchs said, "Child sexual exploitation remains at the top of our agenda. This issue is very much a hidden crime." World at 8. Yup, well, who's been hiding it for years then? Is this the pot calling the kettle black or Asian? British paedophile cases unsolved years after tip-offs. British police forces are still investigating hundreds of cases involving suspected paedophiles more than 2 years after evidence was first passed to UK authorities. Figures show that more than 200 suspects are still being investigated after details were first passed to the Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre (CEOP) by Canadian police in July 2012. Among the 21 UK forces that were able to provide a detailed breakdown of the Canadian cases, which came out of an international sting operation dubbed Operation Spade, 271 are still ongoing. The data obtained by the Press Association also showed that from 724 referrals, 34 people had been charged and 5 had accepted cautions. Controversy was sparked when it emerged that the tip-offs included information about disgraced Cambridgeshire medic Miles Bradbury and teachers Martin Goldberg and Gareth Williams, who both secretly filmed children. Goldberg, who worked at the Thorpe Hall School in Southend, was found to have hundreds of images of school children on his computer when he was discovered dead at his Essex home, while Williams from Cardiff is now serving a 5-year jail term. Pete Saunders from the National Association for People Abused in Childhood criticised the authorities for failing to act quickly enough on the information. He told Sky News, "People who access these kinds of images are a danger to children. The fact we're doing nothing about it is the main concern." The other concern is it demonstrates once again that there are large parts of society or authorities or institutions who simply refuse to believe or to accept the seriousness of the crimes that are in front of their eyes. European news. Denmark tries a soft-handed approach to returned Islamist fighters. Aarhus, Denmark. The rush of morning shoppers parted to make way for Tallah, a lanky 21-year-old in desert camouflage and a long religious beard. He strode through the local mall with a fighter's gait picked up on the battlefields of Syria. Streams of young Muslim men greeted him like a returning king. As-salamu alaikum wa alaikum as-salam. In other countries, Tallah, one of the hundreds of young jihadists from the West who has fought in Syria and Iraq, might be barred from return or thrown into jail. But in Denmark, a country that has spawned more foreign fighters per capita than almost anywhere else, the port city of Aarhus is taking a novel approach by rolling out a welcome mat. In Denmark, not one returned fighter has been locked up, instead taking the view that discrimination at home is as criminal as Islamic State recruiting. Officials here are providing free psychological counselling while finding returnees jobs and spots in schools and universities. Officials credit a new effort to reach out to a radical mosque with staunching the flow of recruits. Some progressives say Aarhus should become a model for other communities in the United States and Europe that are trying to cope with the question of what do you do when the jihad generation comes back to town. For better or worse, this city's answer has left the likes of Talha wandering freely on the streets. The son of a moderate Muslim immigrant from the Middle East, he became radicalised and fought with an Islamic brigade in Syria for 9 months before returning home last October. Back on Danish soil, he still dreams of one day living in a Middle Eastern caliphate. He rejects the Islamic State's beheading of foreign hostages but defends its summary executions of Iraqi and Syrian soldiers. "I know how some people think. They are afraid of us, the ones coming back," said Talha, a name he adopted to protect his identity because he never told his father he went to fight. "Look, we are really not dangerous." Yet critics call this city's soft-handed approach just that, dangerous. And the effort here is fast becoming a pawn in the much larger debate raging across Europe over Islam and the nature of extremism. More and louder voices are here clamouring for new laws that could not only charge returnees with treason but also set curbs on immigration from Muslim countries and on Islamic traditions such as religious circumcision. Danish authorities say the vast majority of the 30 or so Aarhus residents who went to Syria were somehow linked to one of the most polarising houses of worship in Europe, the Grimhofje Mosque. Talha began to worship there 4 years ago, 2 years before he left for Syria. He found the mosque through a childhood friend who helped him leave behind what he described as a world of secular vice, parties with Danish teens, drinking and girls. "That's my past," he said, "not my present." But Talha wants to make one thing clear. He, like the mosque leadership, denies that Grimhofje Mosque recruited him and other fighters. "These are good men," he said with a smile. Others disagree. Police officials say that the statistics prove their approach is working. "In 2013 we had 30 young people go to Syria," said Jorgen Illum, Aarhus's police commissioner. "This year to my knowledge we only had 1. We believe the main reason is our contact and dialogue with the Muslim community." World at 8. The one thing guaranteed to work is a wall and a gun. No one in Europe should underestimate the influence of these terrorists in normal day life in a European country. The police are merely kidding themselves for being terminally lazy. German bikers ride to the rescue against Islamic State, while others blabber. Following in the tire tracks of its Dutch counterparts, a German motorcycle gang has made the trek to the Middle East to fight against fascist Islamic State militants. The Cologne-based Median Empire Motorcycle Club posted Facebook images of its members in Kobane, Syria, carrying military-style weapons, according to the Daily Mail. Bless them. The gang members are also wearing their colours, leather vests featuring their foreboding logo. The image included the caption, "Our boys were in Kobane today and told me today they were shot at but nothing happened. They are okay." The vests will not likely intimidate Islamic barbarians who make it a regular habit to behead innocent civilians, including women and children. The German gang has strong ties to Kurds who were locked in a desperate fight to prevent Islamic fighters from overrunning Kobane, according to the Mail. The group's official Facebook page says the bikers are in the Middle East to distribute aid. One Facebook user posted this message though, "While others blabber and blabber, our boys are at the front fighting." The page also praises Dutch motorcycle gang members who have already travelled to the Middle East to join the fight against Islamic State savages. The No Surrender Banditos made the trip after a Netherlands prosecutor said they would not be breaking any laws. World at 8. Good for the bikers. At last a band of men who believe in acting rather than running. World News. Al Jazeera claims Mexican drug cartels are worse than ISIL. They claim Western obsession with the Islamic State is fuelled more by bigotry than any other genuine assessment of risk or atrocities. The horrific rampage of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, has captured the world's attention. Many Western commentators have characterised ISIL's crimes as unique, no longer practised anywhere else in the civilised world. They argue that the group's barbarianism is intrinsically Islamic, a product of the aggressive and archaic worldview that dominates the Muslim world. The ignorance of these claims is stunning. While there are other organised groups whose depravity and threat to the United States far surpasses that of ISIL, none have engendered the same kind of collective indignation and hysteria. This raises the question, are Americans primarily concerned with ISIL's atrocities or with the fact that Muslims are committing these crimes? Statistics alone does not convey the depravity and threat of the cartels. They carry out hundreds of beheadings every year. Beyond decapitation, the cartels are known to dismember and otherwise mutilate the corpses of their victims, displaying piles of bodies predominantly in towns to terrorise the public into compliance. They routinely target women and children to further intimidate communities. Like ISIL, the cartels also use social media to post graphic images of their atrocious crimes. The narcos also recruit child soldiers, moulding boys as young as 11 into assassins or sending them on suicide missions during armed confrontations with Mexico's army. They kidnap tens of thousands of children every year to use as drug mules or prostitutes, or to simply kill and harvest their organs for the sale on the black market. Those who dare to call for reforms often end up dead. In September, with the apparent assistance of local police, cartels kidnapped and massacred 43 students at a teaching college near the Mexican town of Iguala in response to student protests, leaving their bodies in a mass grave mutilated and burned almost beyond recognition. Unfortunately, the US government cannot formulate an effective response to these much more severe threats because the American public is far too busy disparaging Islam while it's the US military kings Arabs and Muslims abroad. One thing is certain, America's obsession with ISIL is fuelled by Islamophobia rather than any empirical realities. World at 8. There's no comparison. The Mexicans are doing it for money and ISIL are supposedly doing it for a cause. Both are thoroughly evil and nasty. ISIS fears female Kurdish warrior Tekoshin. Death at her hands sends them to hell. While jihadists routinely declare they are willing to die for Allah to ensure a spot in heaven, there is apparently a loophole in that promise. Last month the New York Post reported that Islamic State radicals might embrace death in battle, yet they are petrified of being killed by a female soldier. House International Relations Committee Chair Ed Royce explained that, according to the tradition followed by these terrorists, death at the hands of female is a one-way ticket to hell. He explained that militants apparently believed that if they were killed in battle, they went to paradise as long as they were killed by a man. As a result, female soldiers have recognised the unique advantage they have on the battlefield. Tekoshin, a 27-year-old Kurdish warrior, is among the women fighting terrorists in Iraq and Syria. She said she believes the enemy is more afraid of us than of the men, noting the Islamic State radicals believe they'll go to hell if they die at the hands of a woman. Such a belief only makes a recent Twitter post heralding the military exploits of one terror-fighting woman even more rewarding to those dedicated to defeating Islamic extremism. Thought for the day: are we completely mad? It's crossed my mind that we, the Brits, our medical guys and our government are completely and utterly mad, bad and sad. You will have listened to the news and the effort to stop smoking in open public places, namely parks, and yet amidst all this flubber about smoking in the fresh air is the overridingly stupid ignorance of the powers that be over Ebola. Have you noticed we the public are being softened up by gentle TV programmes and you telling us that we should expect a few cases of Ebola in the UK and not be worried as steps are being taken to ensure we will all be well, blabber, blather, blather and blah. How and why should there be any expected cases of this foul disease in the UK? Can someone tell me why on an island thousands of miles away from West Africa should we expect a few cases? If it is contained within West Africa as opposed to spreading to the rest of Africa, why can't they prevent it coming into Europe? We're all mad. Once again, no one is addressing the elephant in the room. That of the massive amount of migrants that the UK has encouraged over the years into this country from the dark continent, and which will, in the light of this disease, grow ever more exponentially. You'll expect to get many more coming in just to be treated on our NHS, as we're advertising that we are so ready for it. Screening at so-called large airports is a waste of time. Cancelling any flights from West Africa, whether direct or not, and especially through Europe, should be mandatory, and if undertaken now immediately would lessen the amount of possible carriers into the UK. The government seem to think that any person from West Africa, whether they be visiting a plethora of relatives over here or just coming in and staying illegally, would be marching off the planes directly into a screening programme and telling them how they feel. Are they mad? This is the last thing that any of them will do. They will hide the fact they could be carrying this disease and vanish into the African communities in our capital. Why? Because they can. And because although not ignorant of spreading Ebola, they really couldn't care as long as they're out of West Africa and with their relations. Any thought about bringing it into the UK is entirely absent. Migrants are selfish. Time has proved that. They care not for this country or its people, and this Ebola scare will illustrate just that. But even more blatantly, it will illustrate just how multicultural we are when we shouldn't be. Why, for the love of God, are we still taking in West Africans and indeed any other Africans who can lie and say they're from another part of Africa? Why are we not concentrating on the ports and the lorries which will be full of African migrants, not from North Africa but from the Ebola zones? It is through the illegal migrants that this disease will spread like wildfire, and in spreading it will be kept out of the media so that, like the Muslim grooming scandals, one will not upset the African communities in this country. Far better to have hundreds of dead Brits than frighten or upset strangers in this country who could spread a plague and not give a damn. There was a ridiculous Tonight programme on which the Indian reporter was helped into the appropriate garments on the buddy system. I nearly collapsed laughing. Oh yes, just get one of your friends to help you on with all the paraphernalia, which includes green wellies, which is just about all I have against Ebola, when everyone knows if anyone showed any signs of having Ebola, everyone would run to the hills to avoid it, not help someone get into the gear to look after some poor unfortunate who has it. During avian bird flu, all the poor birds in the Far East were slaughtered and entire communities were put into isolation to avoid spreading the disease. The blame was on the animal kingdom and millions of birds were killed which probably didn't need to be. So what does one do when it's humans spreading the disease? Well, the Brits get more into their country and spend millions of pounds in possible treatment for them and set up special units which can cope and invest more money in treatments because all the best treatments have been given to the various aid workers who have contracted it and come back to the UK. Now, if you think that you or I would warrant thousands of pounds worth of medicine if we got sick, think again. It's all gone. In fact, the medical profession are probably hoping for a few to get ill so they can test them for antibodies and possible cures for Ebola. The UK are compounding the international community brain dead by sending West Africa £125 million to help with Ebola. They should be spending that money in preventing migrants and Ebola coming over here in the first place. Now, despite this huge amount of money, do you know what the idiots are doing in West Africa with the dead? What happened during the Black Death and the Great Plague of London? Fire is what happened. You burn bodies, you burn their houses and villages, and you don't bury them in the earth with stones and bits of memorabilia. You burn out the disease, and all the money in the world is not going to give these doctors or foreign helpers the sense to burn the dead. Plague pits are what is needed, burnt with lime or fire, reduced to ash, and then put below ground. Germs live on. Viruses live on, as the Spanish flu virus in the ice, but sand and heat keep and mummify, so the last thing that is needed are pictures of retards carrying the Ebola dead and putting them straight into the ground. What happened to the common sense and survival sense of both the West Africans, their medics and us? Do we all have a death wish? Keep Ebola in West Africa, let it burn itself out, stop all travel, whether direct or indirect from that country, and stop blurring out the black faces on the news and showing the occasional white guy coming in. Get real and stop fooling the British public that there isn't a very real possibility that thanks to our great multi-ethnic mantras and kindness we won't all be complicit in spreading this disease within the UK and within our own communities, because we are all being encouraged by the media to be nice and think about the poor devils in West Africa and not the ones travelling over here every day and every month since that outbreak several months ago which went unreported. The reason it went unreported is the reason why it was not stamped out, because of the ignorance and media sensitivity. Much better to bomb Assad than clear up a small attack of Ebola in Sierra Leone. The root of the matter is still immigration, which Cameron is going to talk about next year, in his dreams. Like UKIP, who have travelled on the back of immigration, the EU poached from the nationalists and making it all more of an acceptable subject now, it is the root of all evils in this country, not money, immigration, and what it has done and will do to the UK and its people. We have our inner city schools accepting new West African and indeed African pupils every day. We are employing the same people in our food stores and fast food outlets day after day. We are employing them as care workers, nurses, in the black market of off-the-grid work as well, all totally untraceable to whatever medical organisations are supposed to check up on these people after they've entered the country. That is, if they see 'em. As far as the Marxist media are concerned, if some poor unfortunate white medic gets Ebola through helping out in West Africa, then he will get all the publicity, not the black guy who sneaks into this country and spreads it around his colleagues and dies. He will vanish amidst the appalling numbers that this disease can infect. Our media is not truthful and in fact contributes to fear and ignorance and doesn't address the basic fact that we should not have this problem in this country. There is no excuse for it. Unless you count the fact that in some way the white race is trying to make up for slavery and colonialism by ignoring the most obvious fact. If Africans are no longer allowed into this country during this Ebola crisis, we do not have a problem of even a few cases unless they erupt from visitors allowed in before the ban, even before small measures were taken. I'm not suggesting boycotting certain schools or eating houses, but if it helps prevent disease like Ebola spreading, then go ahead. The old trick of gobbing into someone's coffee or soup before giving it could well apply. Many of these people have no love for us or this country. It is simply a means to an end to get money or get treated for a disease you cannot get help on in Africa. Allowed in the press was the picture of a nice looking little black boy from West Africa and the fact he was being bullied because of Ebola. Well, unfortunate though that is, I would rather that happen than his brother or sister coming into the country after a holiday in Sierra Leone, spread it amongst the other kids in the school. Awareness is not always fair, but often necessary. I'm not making Ebola a reason to stop all immigration, but I'm wondering why at this time, with this problem in the offing, we haven't acted against protecting our people more than upsetting foreign communities, which are more important to our government, us or them. Because that is what this disease boils down to. Do we accept more West Africans into this country legally or illegally? Ebola doesn't differentiate between an illegal or illegal migrant or a visitor. Ebola doesn't care. You can be black, white or indifferent, young or old, rich or poor, and Ebola doesn't care. Ebola doesn't care what country it affects. It is truly as multiracial and multifaceted disease and accepts all with equal horror and joy. Why should we make the same costly mistake? And finally, the 72 virgins of Allah. A suicide bomber died and went to heaven, as foretold. When he arrived there he met Allah. He said to Allah that he was ready to claim his virgins as promised. Out of curiosity he asked Allah why there were so many virgins in heaven. Allah regarded him for a moment and then replied, actually the 72 virgins are here in heaven because our souls like you murdered them before they could experience the pleasures of sex. So you're here to service them. Since they're virgins, they're quite sexually ravenous and, frankly, you'll be on constant, exhausting duty. And I shall banish you from paradise should you fail. The bomber responded, well, I guess I can live with that. How hard can it be to keep 72 women satisfied for all eternity? And Allah smilingly replied, who said they were women? You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. Warrior Tekoshin, death at her hands sends them straight to hell. Thought for the day, are we completely mad? And finally, the 72 virgins of Allah. UK news. New scandal in Birmingham, child sexploitation predators mainly Asian, victims mainly white. Dozens of girls, some as young as 11, have fallen victim to predatory gangs. 3 out of 4 of the men who groom youngsters.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 20th of October 2000. For sex in Birmingham are Asian, yet their victims are 82% white, say confidential police statistics leaked this week. A Birmingham Safeguarding Children Board study in September 2013, never released to the media, found 111 youngsters were at risk of sexual exploitation in the city, some as young as 11 and almost half under 15 years of age. The failure to prosecute known offenders was startling and 2014. New scandal in Birmingham, child sexploitation predators mainly Asian, victims mainly white. British paedophile cases unsolved, years after tip-offs. Denmark tries a soft-handed approach to returned Islamist fighters. German bikers ride to the rescue against Islamic State while others blabber. Al Jazeera claims Mexican drug cartels are worse than ISIL. ISIS fears female Kurdish unacceptable, it added. West Midlands Police said last night that it was currently dealing with 57 live child sexual exploitation cases and 130 suspected cases. Assistant Chief Constable Carl Fuchs said, "Child sexual exploitation remains at the top of our agenda. This issue is very much a hidden crime." World at 8. Yup, well, who's been hiding it for years then? Is this the pot calling the kettle black or Asian?